Melissa, for 38 years, I've honored your space, your choices, your very being. I spent nights by your side when you burned with fever, worked 2 jobs to put you through college, and never, not once, humiliated you in front of others. If my home, my cooking, my very memories are so unbearable, perhaps it's best you simply don't come back. The words left my mouth with a firmness I didn't know I possessed. My hands trembled, but my voice held steady. Around the birthday table, lovingly decorated, a deathly silence descended. My grandson's eyes were wide. My son Walter swallowed hard. Christine's hand flew to her mouth. And Melissa! My youngest stared, a raw mix of shock and indignation, as if I'd just committed a heinous crime by daring to defend myself. The lemon bundt cake, baked since dawn, sat half-eaten. This cake is far too dry, she'd sneered moments before, that dismissive tone her signature. The old photographs I'd painstakingly gathered, ridiculed as awful pictures nobody wants to see. On my 67th birthday, in my own home, I'd been reduced to a useless old woman before my entire family. You must be wondering how we arrived here. How a mother and daughter become near strangers. How respect can erode so completely that a family celebration transforms into a battleground. It all started becoming clear about 6 months ago, when Melissa began her campaign for a senior living community. "It would be better for you, Mom," she chirped with that saccharine concern. "You'd have company, activities. This house is simply too vast for one person." What she didn't say, but what I heard perfectly, was, "This house is worth a fortune and you're just taking up space." My husband Arthur passed 5 years ago. We built this house brick by brick when our boys were small. Every corner holds a story. Every crack in these walls reminds me of something. How could I abandon all that for a sterile, white-walled room in some facility, no matter how 5-star Melissa insisted it was? That birthday morning, I woke with the dawn. 67 isn't just any age, and I wanted everything flawless. I'd spent the week cleaning, my arthritis protesting every ache. I insisted on preparing everything myself. The lemon bundt cake from my mother's recipe, the homemade appetizers the grandkids adored, even Walter's indispensable potato salad. I'd pulled out old photographs, one of the 3 of them as kids, playing at the beach. Another from Rachel's wedding, everyone beaming. A special one of Melissa on her dad's lap when she was about 5 and adored him more than anything. I thought maybe, just maybe, those images might soften a heart that seemed to have turned to stone. Walter arrived first, punctual as ever. He came with Christine and the twins, Ethan and Noah, already teenagers, but they still hugged me tight. They brought a beautiful bouquet and a perfume I'd mentioned months ago. How he remembered, I'll never know. "Mom, you shouldn't have done all this yourself," he murmured, helping me with the last few arrangements. "Nonsense, son. It does me good." Rachel arrived next, with her husband Paul. Childless, they're the global wanderers. They brought a gorgeous scarf from a recent trip to Portugal and a sleek digital photo album. "For you to finally get those old pictures out of their boxes," Rachel explained. Melissa arrived last, as always. Late, as always. Matt, her husband, seemed visibly uncomfortable the moment he crossed the threshold. Little Sophie ran to hug me, but Melissa reined her in. "Be careful with Grandma, Sophie. She might fall if you jump on her like that." That was the first prick. That condescending tone, as if I were made of cracked porcelain. I ignored it, pulling my granddaughter into my embrace anyway. "We brought this," she said, offering a small wrapped gift. It was a book. How to Prepare for Your Golden Years. I swallowed the bitter pill and thanked her. During lunch, Melissa barely touched her food. She poked, prodded, made faces. When I served the cake and unfurled the photos, the explosion came. The criticisms, a relentless barrage. The food, the house, the awful pictures, and finally the final jab. Frankly, Mom, you could try harder. Or better yet, you could finally agree to that senior living community we suggested. At least there you'd have decent activities, suitable for your age. That's when something inside me snapped. All these years swallowing insults, trying to understand her difficult temperament, justifying it as just her way. In that moment, I saw it wasn't fair. Not to me, not to the others cringing at the table, not even to Sophie, who was learning a terrible lesson from every interaction she witnessed. After my outburst and Melissa's dramatic exit, the party fizzled out. Walter and Rachel insisted on staying, helping me clear everything, ensuring I was truly okay. "Mom, are you really all right?" Rachel asked, her brow furrowed with concern, as we washed the dishes. "I am, sweetheart. Better, in fact, than I've been in a very long time." And it was true. A strange lightness had settled within me, as if I'd finally expelled a stone lodged in my throat for years. That night, after everyone had gone, I sank into my favorite armchair, the one Arthur used to read the newspaper in, and I cried. Not purely from sadness, though a measure of it lingered. I cried from relief, from liberation. The next day, the phone didn't stop. Walter, Rachel, even Matt, Melissa's husband, all called to check on me. Everyone circled the elephant in the room, Melissa's behavior and my unprecedented reaction. "Debbie, I'm so sorry about yesterday," Matt mumbled, visibly embarrassed. Melissa's processing everything. "You don't have to apologize for her, Matt. She stopped being a child a long time ago." A week passed without a word from her. I wasn't going to call first. Not this time. Decades of always ceding, always reaching out, always apologizing for things I hadn't even done. No more. The following Sunday, I was watering the garden when I saw her car pull up. My heart quickened, but I kept my composure, continuing to water as if I hadn't noticed a thing. Melissa got out alone. No Matt, no Sophie. She approached hesitantly, a rare sight for her, always so self-assured. "Hi, Mom. Hi, Melissa." Silence. I wasn't making it easy. "Can I come in?" I simply nodded towards the door, continuing to water. She went inside and I took my time, finishing my task before following. In the living room, Melissa perched on the edge of the sofa, restless, fiddling with her purse strap. "Want some coffee?" I offered, more from ingrained habit than genuine desire. "No, thanks." Another silence. "Mom, I came because, well, Matt thinks I should apologize." A sharp pang of disappointment. "Matt thinks? And what do you think, Melissa?" She sighed, a puff of annoyance. "Look, maybe I went a little overboard on your birthday. But you know me. I've always been direct. Always spoken my mind. Being direct isn't an excuse for being cruel, Melissa." "Cruel? Mom, I was just being realistic. This house is too big, you're getting older, and yes, that cake was dry. What's the crime in telling the truth?" I sank into the armchair opposite her, already weary of a conversation that had barely begun. "The problem, Melissa, is you confuse sincerity with savagery. The problem is, you believe you have the right to belittle people, to shrink them down, and then you dismiss it as just your way. The problem is you walked into my house, on my birthday, and humiliated me in front of my family. Her eyes widened, a flicker of genuine shock. She'd never heard me speak this way. I didn't want to humiliate you, Mom. I just think you need to be more practical. This house, these memories. You live in the past. And what if I do? It's my past. They're my memories. Who are you to dictate how I live out my final years? She shot to her feet, agitated. Last year's? See? This is what I'm talking about. This drama, this victim narrative. You could live another 20 years, Mom. But you need to care for yourself. You need a suitable place, with people who can watch over me, control me, dictate my medicine, my sleep schedule. Help you. Why is it so impossible to accept help? I rose, feeling that same resolute firmness from my birthday. Because what you call help, I call control. Because you're not concerned about me, Melissa. You're concerned about the inconvenience I might become, the trouble I might cause. That's not fair, she cried, tears finally brimming. I do worry about you. You worry so much you want to stick me in a facility just so you don't have to deal with me. You worry so much you can't get through a single lunch without criticizing everything I do. That's not worry, Melissa. That's selfishness. She snatched her purse, hands trembling. I'm not staying to hear this. You're being unfair and ungrateful. Ungrateful? I echoed, incredulous. For not accepting being treated like a burden? For demanding respect in my own home? Melissa stalked to the door, but stopped before leaving. You'll regret talking to me like this. One day you'll need me. And then you'll remember this conversation. The door slammed shut. I stood there in the middle of the living room, my heart racing, a strange sense of victory mixed with a profound sadness. That night, Walter called. Melissa had called him, furious, recounting her version of events. Mom, are you okay? Melissa said you two had a really nasty argument. I'm fine, son. Just tired of being treated like some incompetent child. I get it. Melissa's always been, intense. Her way is the problem, Walter. I can't keep letting her diminish me like that. He fell silent for a moment. You're right, Mom. I think we all let it go on too long. We allowed Melissa to treat you that way because, well, because it's always been that way. But it's not right. That conversation bolstered me. In the days that followed, Rachel visited, then Walter, even Matt with Sophie. Everyone sidestepped mentioning Melissa directly, but I felt a shift. A new respect infused their words, how they sought my opinion, how they treated me not like a frail old lady, but as the family matriarch. 2 weeks after the confrontation, a letter arrived. Yes, a letter on actual paper, a rarity these days. It was from Melissa. Mom, maybe I crossed a line. I don't know how to be different, but I'm going to try. Can we talk? Melissa? It wasn't an apology, not truly, but from Melissa, it felt like a monumental surrender. I replied with an invitation for coffee, just the two of us, the following afternoon. When she arrived, she carried herself differently, less arrogant, more cautious. We served coffee in silence, and then, to my surprise, she finally spoke. I'm scared of getting old, Mom. That stopped me cold. Seeing you age reminds me that I'll get old too. And I don't know how to deal with that. I don't know how to deal with the idea of losing my independence, my relevance. And you think pushing me into a senior living facility will solve your fear? Melissa lowered her eyes. It's not rational, I know. But somehow, if you're settled, tucked away in a safe place, I don't have to face it every single day. Melissa, getting old isn't about being tucked away. It's about continuing to live, just with more stories to tell. She offered a small, sad smile. You always have those ready-made phrases. They're not ready-made phrases. It's what I've learned from living. We fell silent again, but the quiet was different this time. Less hostile. I don't know if I can change, Mom. This way of being, it's been ingrained for so long. I'm not asking you to change who you are. I'm just asking for respect. There's a vast difference between being sincere and being cruel. She nodded slowly, thoughtful. I'll try. I won't promise miracles, but I'll try. We didn't resolve everything that day, of course. Complex relationships aren't mended in a single afternoon. But it was a start. An acknowledgement that something had to shift. In the weeks that followed, I noticed subtle differences. Melissa called more, genuinely asking how I was, without the underlying suggestion I couldn't manage my own life. When she visited, she visibly strained not to criticize the house, the food, my choices. It wasn't perfect. She still occasionally let slip an acidic comment. But now, when our eyes met, there was a recognition, a silent apology, and more importantly, a boundary established she knew not to cross. A month after the birthday incident, an unexpected call came. It was Sophie, my 8-year-old granddaughter. Grandma, Mommy said I can sleep over at your house this weekend. Can I? I was surprised. Melissa had always been fiercely protective of Sophie, rarely letting her sleep outside the house, much less with me, who, according to Melissa, didn't have the energy to care for a child. Of course, sweetie. I'll get everything ready. Mommy said she'll drop me off Friday after school. Can I sleep in her old room? You sure can, honey. When I hung up, I stood by the phone, intrigued. Was this a peace offering? A genuine step for Melissa to show she trusted me? On Friday, I lovingly prepared Melissa's old room. I'd kept some of the original furniture, but updated the mattress and bedding. I laid out stuffed animals I saved for the grandkids, and even unearthed an old moon-shaped nightlight Melissa adored as a child. When they arrived, Sophie ran to embrace me. Melissa lingered at the doorway, watching the scene with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. Thanks for taking her, she said, handing me Sophie's backpack. Matt and we need some time to talk. There was something in her tone, a raw vulnerability she rarely revealed. Is everything all right between you two? She gave a slight shrug, trying for casual, but I saw the worry etch itself into her eyes. Just some things to work out. Nothing major. But I knew my daughter. There was more unspoken than spoken. Melissa, if you need to talk, I'm fine, Mom. Really. She bent down to kiss Sophie. Behave for Grandma, okay? Mommy will pick you up Sunday after lunch. After she left, Sophie and I had a wonderful weekend. We baked cinnamon cookies, watched old movies, and I recounted stories from Melissa's childhood. Stories that made Sophie giggle and ask, Mommy really did that? On Sunday, when Melissa came to pick up Sophie, I noticed her eyes were red and swollen. She'd been crying, and heavily. Soph, go get your things, please, she asked, and when the girl left, Melissa collapsed onto the couch. Matt wants a divorce. The words came out as a strangled sob. I sat beside her, too stunned to speak. He said he can't take my attitude anymore, that I'm pushing everyone away, including you. I took her hand, feeling its tremor. He mentioned what happened on your birthday. Said it was the final straw, seeing how I treated you. Said he doesn't want Sophie growing up thinking it's normal to treat people that way, especially family. Tears streamed down her face. And the worst part is he's right, Mom. I'm pushing everyone away. Walter barely calls. Rachel avoids being alone with me. And now you. The only person who always accepted me for who I am, even when I didn't deserve it. I embraced my daughter, feeling her body shake with the contained sobs. I don't know how to change, Mom. I don't even know where to begin. In that moment, I understood. The confrontation on my birthday hadn't just been about me and my dignity. It had been the catalyst for something larger. Something that perhaps needed to happen for a very long time. We begin by acknowledging that we need to change, I responded softly. And it seems you've already taken that vital first step. Sophie returned with her backpack, and Melissa quickly wiped away her tears, forcing a fragile smile. Are you okay, Mommy? The girl asked, her small voice tinged with worry. It's going to be okay, sweetie, Melissa replied, her gaze meeting mine. Grandma and I are talking about important things. As they were leaving, Melissa paused at the door. Mom, do you think we could talk more? Maybe coffee next week? Of course, honey. My door's always been open for you. She nodded, a flicker of gratitude and shame in her gaze. After they left, I sat on the couch for a long time, thinking about how life truly comes full circle. How one moment of courage, the one where I finally stood my ground on my birthday, could unleash such profound changes. I didn't know what would happen with Melissa's marriage, if she could truly change. If our relationship could be rebuilt on healthier foundations. But for the first time in a very long time, I felt hope. The phone rang, pulling me from my thoughts. It was Walter. Mom, Melissa called me. She sounded different. Did something happen? I sighed, gazing at the family photo on the wall. The very one Melissa had criticized on my birthday. Something did happen, son, and I think it's still happening. But maybe, just maybe, it's something good this time. As I hung up, I realized that, at 67, I was still learning a fundamental lesson. Sometimes the greatest act of love isn't to yield, isn't to automatically forgive. Sometimes the greatest act of love is to set clear, unyielding boundaries. And now, with Melissa finally facing the consequences of years of corrosive behavior, I wondered, were we ready, mother and daughter, to rebuild something new from the rubble? Or were some wounds too deep to ever truly heal? Only time would tell. But one thing I knew for sure, that bitter birthday had been just the beginning of a story far from over. And true to her word, the following week, Melissa came for coffee. She arrived punctually, a rarity for her, carrying a small bouquet of daisies, my favorite flowers, a detail that surprised me she even remembered. They're beautiful, I commented, placing them in an old vase that had belonged to my mother. I remember you always had these in the garden at the old house, she said, her gaze drifting to the vase. The one by the kitchen window. That small detail hit me like a physical wave. Melissa remembered. Beneath all that cultivated hardness, she held fragments of our life together. We sat on the back porch, where the morning sun bathed us in gentle warmth. I served coffee, and the cinnamon cookies she'd adored as a child. She took one, a faint, sad smile gracing her lips. These cookies, it's been so long. Sophie loved them this weekend, I commented. She ate almost a whole batch. A silence settled between us, Not entirely uncomfortable, but thick with unspoken expectation. Finally, Melissa took a deep breath. "Matt and I talked a lot this week," she began, her gaze fixed on her cup. "He agreed to try couples therapy before making any definitive decisions." "That's good, honey." "It is. I think so." She finally looked up. "He said something I can't stop thinking about. He said I'm afraid of becoming you. And that's why I try to control you so much." I felt a pang in my chest. "And you think that's true?" She shrugged, a gesture so reminiscent of the teenager she once was. "Maybe. I don't know. I always thought it was the opposite. That I wanted you to be more like me. Practical, organized, efficient. Younger," I added softly. She didn't deny it. "Seeing you age scares me, Mom. Seeing you alone in this house, surrounded by your memories, your old things. It's like looking into a future I desperately don't want for myself." "Getting old isn't a choice, Melissa. It's a privilege not everyone gets." "I know, but..." She hesitated, picking at a loose thread on the couch. "Remember when Grandma Eleanor got sick? How brutal it was at the end? How she refused to accept help until she had no choice?" I nodded. The memories of those difficult last months with my own mother, almost 20 years ago, still vivid. I dread going through that. Seeing you go through that. Of Sophie having to care for me like that one day. It was the first time Melissa had truly opened up to me like that in, well, perhaps ever. I realized that behind that controlling facade was a raw, primal fear. "Honey, I can't promise I won't get sick or need care someday. No one can. But I can promise I'm doing my utmost to live well now. And that includes living my way, in my home, making my own choices." "Even if those choices aren't the most practical?" she asked, a familiar trace of her old critical tone surfacing. "Even so, because they're mine, and they deserve respect just like yours." Melissa was quiet for a moment, letting my words sink in. "You know what else Matt said?" She continued, her voice softer. "That I treat Sophie the same way I treat you. Controlling, criticizing, never satisfied with what she does." That surprised me. I hadn't grasped the full extent of the problem. "And you agree with him?" Melissa bit her lip, a gesture I hadn't seen since she was a little girl. At first I was furious, but then I started paying attention to the way I talked to her about her grades, about the mess in her room, about how she dresses. She swallowed hard. "I'm doing to her exactly what I swore I'd never do." "What did you swear you'd never do?" "Be like my dad." That hit me like a punch to the gut. Arthur had been a good man in many ways, but he was rigid, a perfectionist, especially with Melissa, the youngest he'd hoped would be a boy. "Your father loved you, Melissa." "I know he did, but nothing I did was ever good enough for him. My grades, my drawings, my choices. Always a comment, a critique. Could be better, Melissa. Why didn't you try harder, Melissa?" She shook her head slowly. "And now I'm doing the exact same thing to my daughter. And to you." I extended my hand across the table and took hers. To my surprise, she didn't pull away. "It's never too late to change, honey. I'm almost 40, Mom. These patterns are deeply ingrained, part of me. I'm 67 and I'm still changing. Look at me, I finally learned to stand my ground with you." She let out a short, genuine laugh. "That's true. You truly surprised me that day." I surprised myself too. We fell silent again, but this time it was a different quiet. Lighter, almost comfortable. "Mom," she began hesitantly. "Remember that time when I was about 12 and you caught me trying on your expensive lipstick?" The memory surfaced instantly. "I do. You had it smeared all over your mouth and around it like a clown. You didn't scold me. You just sat down next to me, carefully wiped my face clean, and then showed me how to apply it properly." I smiled at the remembrance. "It was a really expensive lipstick your aunt had brought from Europe. But your eager little face was worth more than any lipstick, any price. I always remember that when I lose patience with Sophie," she confessed. "I always think, what would Mom do?" And the answer is usually the precise opposite of what I end up doing. That confession touched me deeply. After all these years of criticism and control, Melissa still saw me as a role model, even if it was one she struggled to embody. "You know what else scares me?" she continued, her voice tight. "Sophie's starting to act just like me. The other day I caught her talking to her doll the exact same way I talked to her. Critical, impatient. It was like staring into a horrible mirror." "There's still time to change that reflection, Melissa." "How? How do you change something so deeply ingrained, so fundamentally a part of you?" I thought for a moment. "One step at a time. Starting with recognizing the problem, which you've already done. Then, perhaps, asking for help." "Therapy, you mean?" It wasn't a question. "It really helped your sister Rachel when she was navigating that tough patch." Melissa nodded slowly. "I've already booked my first session. For me. Not just with Matt. I'm going Monday." I felt a wave of immense pride. "That's incredibly courageous, honey." "I'm scared, Mom. Scared of uncovering things about myself I don't want to face." "I'll be here for you. Not to judge, not to control, just to support." She squeezed my hand, her eyes glistening. "Thank you. And I'm sorry. For everything. For the birthday, for the criticism, for trying to control your life. You're forgiven. But remember, forgiveness doesn't mean we revert to the old patterns. It means we're willing to build something new, something better." She nodded, a glimmer of understanding in her eyes. We finished our coffee in a comfortable silence, watching the birds in the garden. As Melissa was leaving, she paused at the door and turned back. "Mom, we're thinking of taking Sophie to the beach next holiday. That same beach where we used to go when we were kids. Would you like to come with us?" The invitation caught me off guard. Melissa had never invited me on a family trip. "Are you sure? I don't want to intrude on your family time." "I'm sure. Sophie would love it, and..." She hesitated. "It would be good to have you there, to help me not repeat the same mistakes." "Then I'd love to." After she left, I kept replaying our conversation. It was just a start, of course. Decades of entrenched patterns don't unravel with a single heartfelt talk, but it was a promising beginning. In the weeks that followed, I noticed subtle shifts. Melissa called more frequently, not to check up on me, in that subtly controlling way, but to genuinely chat. She'd ask about my day, about my garden projects, about the book I was reading. One day, about a month after our talk, she showed up unexpectedly with Sophie. "We've come to kidnap Grandma," Sophie announced, her face bright. "Kidnap?" I asked, a smile tugging at my lips. "I thought we could go to the movies," Melissa explained. "That new animated film Sophie wants to see is playing. Then we could grab dinner, if you're up for it, of course. I'd love that. Let me just grab my purse. At the cinema, I sat between Melissa and Sophie. Midway through the film, during a particularly moving scene, I felt Melissa's hand seek mine in the dark. I squeezed it back, feeling a connection we hadn't shared in years. Later at the restaurant, I observed how Melissa interacted with Sophie. There was a visible effort to be more patient, to listen more, to criticize less. It wasn't perfect. She still let slip an acerbic comment here and there, but the shift was remarkable. "How's therapy going?" I asked when Sophie went to the restroom. "Hard," Melissa admitted, her voice low. "I'm uncovering things about myself that aren't pretty to look at. But they're necessary. And with Matt, we're working on it. He says he sees changes, but that he needs time to trust they're permanent." She fiddled with her napkin. "I don't blame him. I've promised to change before. The difference is that now you're actually doing the work, not just promising." Melissa nodded. "My therapist said something interesting last session. She said that often we treat others the way we fear being treated. That my excessive need for control comes from a fear of being controlled, of being vulnerable. That makes sense. She also suggested I have unresolved issues with Dad, with how he treated me, always demanding perfection." I sighed. "Your father was a complex man, Melissa. He loved you all deeply, but he didn't know how to show it in a healthy way. He came from a family where affection was considered weakness. Like that time I got a 95 on my math test, and instead of congratulating me, he asked why it wasn't a 100. Exactly. He thought he was motivating you to be better. He didn't realize the damage he was causing. I'm doing the same thing to Sophie," she admitted quietly. "The other day she showed me a drawing. So proud. And my first reaction was to point out what could be improved. I watched the light in her eyes. Just dim, Mom. It was horrible." "What did you do then?" I bit back the comment. I hugged her and told her the drawing was wonderful, that she had talent. And you know what's even weirder? I wasn't lying. The drawing was genuinely good. Why was my first instinct to criticize? Because it's the pattern, you know. But patterns can be broken, Melissa. Sophie came back, and the conversation shifted to lighter topics. But that moment of Melissa's raw vulnerability and self-awareness stayed with me. The beach trip over the holiday was revealing in countless ways. It was the first time in years we'd spent more than a day together as a family. I stayed in the same hotel, in an adjoining room. On the first morning, I woke early and went for a walk on the beach. To my surprise, I found Melissa already there, sitting in the sand, watching the ocean. "Early bird," I commented, settling beside her. "Couldn't sleep well. Too many thoughts. Want to share?" She drew circles in the sand with her finger. I remembered when we used to come here, the 5 of us. Dad, you, Walter, Rachel, and me. How different it was. Different how? I was so free. I'd run, shout, build sandcastles without a single worry if they were perfect or not. Melissa's gaze drifted to the horizon. When did it change? When did I start judging myself so harshly? Judging everyone else? It wasn't a simple answer. I guess it happens gradually. We just absorb expectations, pressures, fears. Before you know it, you're no longer that free kid. Yesterday, when we arrived, Sophie wanted to build a sandcastle. My first instinct was to say it was too late, that we were tired from the drive, that we'd do it tomorrow. But then I thought about how you always said yes to those things. How there was always time for one more story, one more game. So you said yes. Melissa smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile. I did. We spent almost 2 hours building a huge castle, complete with a moat. Matt joined us. It was fun. I'd forgotten it could be so much fun just to play, without a goal, without pressure. Life's made of those moments, Melissa. Not the grand achievements, not the perfect houses or brilliant careers. It's made of sandcastles the tide washes away, but that linger forever in your memory. She leaned her head on my shoulder, a gesture so rare it brought tears to my eyes. Thanks for not giving up on me, Mom, even when I deserved it. Moms don't give up, I replied simply. That afternoon, I watched Melissa with Sophie at the hotel pool. There was a lightness about her I hadn't seen in years. She laughed, splashed water, let Sophie climb on her shoulders to jump. Matt watched from the edge, a smile mixing surprise and hope. Later, when we were all gathered for dinner, Sophie announced, "This is the best trip ever. Grandma, Mommy, Daddy, and me." "It sure is, Princess," Matt agreed, exchanging a significant look with Melissa. "Mommy's different," Sophie continued with that brutal honesty kids possess. "She's happier. She doesn't get mad about little things anymore." Melissa blushed, but she didn't deny it. "I'm trying to be a better mommy, Soph." "You already are the best mommy," Sophie replied with unwavering conviction. "You just kind of forgot for a little while." We all chuckled, touched by the child's simple wisdom. On the final night of the trip, Melissa knocked on my door late. She seemed agitated. "Sorry about the hour, Mom. Can we talk?" We sat on the small balcony, under the starry sky. "Matt and I talked a lot today," she began. "About us, about the future. He said he sees real changes in me, that he's willing to keep trying." "That's wonderful, honey." "It is, but..." She hesitated. He also said something that truly made me think. He said part of the problem has always been how I treated you, how I talked about you, that it showed so much about who I was. I stayed silent, waiting for her to continue. "I realized I've always been unfair to you, Mom. I always criticized you for not being what I thought you should be. More ambitious, more modern, more... I don't know. I never stopped to truly see who you are." "And who do you think I am, Melissa?" She thought for a moment, truly searching. "You're the strongest person I know. Not that obvious strength of someone who shouts the loudest or imposes their will, but that quiet strength that sustains, that forgives, that waits for the right moment." Her words moved me deeply. "When Dad died," she continued, "you didn't crumble like I feared. You reorganized your life, found new interests, kept moving forward. You maintained your dignity and independence. That's what I should have admired, not criticized." "Thank you, honey. It means so much to hear that from you." "You know what else I realized? That I'm scared I won't be strong like you. That I won't be able to handle losses, or aging, or the quiet ache of loneliness. You're stronger than you think, Melissa. Look at you now, facing your demons, working to break decades-old patterns. That takes immense courage." She smiled, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I guess I inherited a bit of your strength, after all." Inherited a lot more than you realize. When we got back from the trip, something fundamental had shifted between us. It wasn't perfect. We still had moments of tension, still the occasional sharp comment. But there was also a new understanding, a mutual respect that hadn't existed before. Melissa continued with therapy, both individual and couples. Slowly, her marriage began to stabilize. Matt, who'd always been a good man, seemed relieved to have back the woman he'd fallen in love with, before bitterness and control had consumed her. Sophie blossomed with her mom's change. She became more confident, more expressive. One day, Melissa called me, her voice thick with emotion. "Mom, Sophie brought home a math test today with a C. You know what my first reaction was? To ask why it wasn't better. But I stopped myself. I asked her how she felt, if she found the test hard. She said she'd tried really hard. That math is just genuinely tough for her. And you know what I did? I hugged her and told her I was proud of her effort. That not everything in life needs to be an A. And how did she react? She cried, Mom. My daughter cried with relief in my arms. I realized how much pressure I'd been putting on her, how much fear of disappointing me. You're breaking the cycle, Melissa. That's what matters. 6 months after my fateful birthday, Walter organized a Sunday family dinner at his house. The whole family would be there. Him and Christine, Rachel and Paul, Melissa, Matt and Sophie. And me, of course. When I arrived, I was greeted with warm hugs. There was a different atmosphere, lighter, more genuine. Melissa arrived shortly after, bringing a pie she'd baked herself. "It's not perfect," she announced with a laugh, "but it was made with love." During dinner, we talked, laughed, recalled old stories. There was no tension in the air, none of that walking on eggshells feeling that had once accompanied our family gatherings. At one point, Walter proposed a toast. "To our family, with all its quirks, its stories, its ups and downs. And especially to Mom, who taught us it's never too late to set healthy boundaries." Everyone raised their glasses. Melissa looked me in the eye as we toasted, a gaze that spoke volumes. After dinner, while I was helping Christine tidy up the kitchen, she commented, "Your relationship with Melissa is so different. The change is truly incredible. We're working on it, day by day. You know what Walter said the other day? That you setting that boundary on your birthday was the best thing that could have happened. For all of us." I thought about that. About how a single moment of courage, of reclaimed dignity, could spark such profound positive changes. Later, when we were all on the porch, watching the kids play in the yard, Melissa sat down beside me. "I'm thinking of getting back into painting," she said casually. "Painting? You haven't painted since you were a teenager." "I know, right? I gave it up because Dad said it wasn't a serious career, but I always loved it. My therapist suggested I revisit activities that give me genuine pleasure. I think that's a wonderful idea. Actually," she continued, a touch hesitant, "I thought we could do it together. There's that studio at the community center that offers classes for all ages. We could sign up, you and I." The suggestion caught me by surprise. Melissa had never once suggested an activity for us to do together. "I'd love that, honey." She smiled, a genuine light in her eyes. "Great. I already signed us up to start next month." That night, driving home, I reflected on the journey of the past 6 months, how my bitter birthday had transformed into a turning point for our entire family. It wasn't a fairy tale. Melissa still had her difficult moments. We were still learning to communicate in healthy ways. There were still old wounds that needed time to fully heal. But there was hope. There was respect. There was the real possibility of building a new relationship, based not on control or fear, but on acceptance and genuine love. As I stepped inside, I paused to look at the family photo on the wall, the very one Melissa had criticized on my birthday. Now, next to it, was a new one. All of us on the beach, during that transformative trip. Melissa, Matt, Sophie, and me, smiling, with the ocean in the background and sand castles at our feet. 2 days later, a text from Melissa. "Mom, I'm doing some cleaning here at home, and found some of your things that were with me. Can I stop by this afternoon to drop them off?" When she arrived, she carried a small box. Inside, to my surprise, were objects I no longer even remembered. A brooch that had belonged to my mother, some old photos, letters I'd written to her when she went away for college. "I kept all of these for years," she explained. "Even during the times I was most distant from you. I guess I always knew, deep down, how important you are to me." I picked up one of the letters, recognizing my own handwriting from 20 years ago. In it, I told her how proud I was, how much I believed in her potential, how my love was unconditional. "You read these letters?" I asked. "Many times, especially during tough times." She hesitated. "Even when I was being hardest on you, most critical, I'd go back to these letters. I guess I was searching for the security that despite everything, you still loved me." "I always loved you, Melissa, even through the toughest times." "I know, Mom. I always did. I just didn't know how to give that love back in a healthy way." As we sorted through those small treasures together, I realized our story was far from over. That at 67, I was still learning how to be a mother. And Melissa, at 38, was still learning how to be a daughter. And perhaps that's exactly how it was meant to be. It's this constant dance, isn't it? Of learning, of hitting bumps and finding our footing, of setting boundaries and making peace. A dance that only truly ends when the song of life fades. That night, before I drifted off, I picked up my journal, a habit I'd recently rediscovered, and wrote. Today, I finally understood something deep in my bones. Setting boundaries doesn't push away the people who truly matter. Quite the opposite. It actually creates the space for real love to blossom. At 67, I finally learned that respecting myself isn't selfish. It's the greatest gift I can give my children. Because by respecting me, I'm teaching them to do the same, for themselves and for others. I closed the journal, feeling a peace I hadn't known in ages. The road ahead with Melissa would still have its ups and downs, sure. But now we were walking it together, no longer heading in opposite directions. And that, all on its own, was a victory I never thought I'd win. Especially not after that bitter birthday afternoon, when I finally said, enough.